Welcome everybody on the YouTube live stream and on the Jitsi platform. So this is the eighth round of the webinar that we are starting with, and we thank everybody, both the panel members and the audience who are encouraging us on a regular basis, and welcome once more. So we'll start our session. It will be a 2-hour session. So the first part of the session, already most of you would have seen in the audience YouTube. We already run our presentation to the overall structure of the this webinar. Overall purpose is to take forward the webinar. So there were 8 webinars which we have completed so far. That's sorry, this is the 8th webinar and 7 webinars we have completed. We covered within these webinars various domains, including ports, including road sector, including corona logistic, vaccination, transport, logistics, and various other topics. And this webinar is scheduled on every Monday, every Saturday, last Saturday of the month from 11 to 1. This we are tried to fixed more or less so that everybody fixes in their calendar and looks forward for this webinar. Now, having introduced about the webinar series, I'll just go on to CILT, introduction of CILT. This is, of course, quite a repetition for some of you who are coming regularly. But for most, but there are quite a few new members who are joining. So we thought we'll repeat this. So CILT is an international body formed post Second World War, for the First World War in United Kingdom, and it received its royal charter in 1926 from King George V. So then, from then on, it has become an international body and spread over various countries. And has a membership of around 30,000. These countries are both Commonwealth and non-Commonwealth, and they are currently around 30 in number. And CILT International, under that aegis, Indian chapter was formed in 1987, and Indian chapter is active in both in policy formulation, policy implementation, and acting as a forum for industries and professionals, and is also furthering the logistics education. So in all these 4 domains, it is active, and and so under these mandates, it regularly conducts training programs, campaigns for memberships, and also within the members there is a live discussion which is going on various issues related to logistics. And it conducts annual conferences, but last year because of COVID we could not conduct this conference. But compensating that, we are conducting a lot of webinars, not only from Hyderabad chapter. There is Women in Logistics and Transport, which conducts its own regular webinars for various women members, and thus it is very active in the overall membership development, overall education of its members, and also the general public. So there are 2 kinds of memberships which are possible in under CILT. One is a corporate membership, other is individual members. So right now we have around 40 corporate members and around 3,000 and odd individual members. And it also conducts training programs which are on various topics of logistics, including the railway terminal management, port sector logistics, and other topics. And it is also in active collision with various other bodies. For example, Transport Mitra, which is founded by our own member, CILT member, conducts regular sessions for the drivers and also works for advancement of trucking sector and trucking drivers. Okay, next. So coming to membership categories, we can there are 2 kinds of memberships we already told you, and out of the individual membership there are again 4 different kinds, which is a student member or associate member, which is quite initial membership. And in addition to student and associate membership, you have what is called a life member, and we have what is called a fellow member. Fellow member is formed on invitation, and life member, if you meet the basic criteria of some experience, then you can join as life member. Otherwise, initial members are either students or associates. And life members, so student fees is around 2,000, and annual fee for life chartered member is 5,000. But for life member, you if you pay 18,000, then you are there forever in terms in the membership. And of course, in addition to that, for life membership for government organizations, there is a 90% reimbursement. So all those who are associated with the government are requested to avail this facility and join the organization. And you can be rest assured, either you spend 18,000 or the lesser amount, you will be enriched for much more than what you spent. Because I joined around 1.5 years back, and I'm quite happy that I joined in this forum. Next. Corporate membership is also there. It is around 2,95,000. And you, by joining as a corporate member, you get 2 memberships free. Then there is a 50% discount on delegate fee for various programs that are organized, and around 10 to 15% discount on the training fee. So these are about the membership. If you want to contact us, the email is already given, CILT-Hyderabad@gmail.com. We can, you can be anywhere from India, but if you contact us, then we'll direct you to the respective chapters or to the head office. And so please take liberty in communicating to us. Thank you very much. This is about the CILT. Any questions, you can either mail me or put it in the chat box of YouTube, and I'll clarify in the process of the discussion. Okay. So this is about the CILT. Now I'll give you a quick overview of the webinar, the purpose, and so the webinar is about discussion about PPP, and PPP in transport and logistics is a very wide topic. So right now we have limited ourselves to few areas, few sectors, and so this webinar is we have an eminent panel of speakers, all experienced in their own domain, all have made independent contributions in the sectors or to the domain as a whole, and so we request everybody to concentrate and listen on the YouTube side. So outline of the webinar will soon be projected on the PPT. So we will start with our inaugural address with the general manager, then followed by a keynote address by Professor Raghuram, and then sectoral specialist Abhijit Narendra will speak about railways. Amber Dubey will speak about aviation sector, and then there about bus sector we have 2 speakers, Prashanth, Bachu, and Sri Prasanna Patwardhan. Each of the speakers will be introduced independently at the time when they are about to speak. So now we will go on to the webinar proper. So as a part of this, I request Sri Subham Jain to introduce our General Manager South Central Railway, Sri Gajanan Mallya. After the introduction, I request Sri General Manager sir to take over and continue his address. Subham Jain, to you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. It's a privilege and honor for me to introduce Sri Gajanan Mallya, GM South Central Railways. Sir has joined Indian Railways through 1979 batch of Special Class Railway Apprentice of the Indian Railway Service of Mechanical Engineers. In his 40 years of service, Sir has held diverse portfolios in Integral Coach Factory, Rail India Technical and Economic Service, and as Divisional Railway Manager of Ranchi Division. It was during Sir's leadership when Division obtained 5 performance efficiency shields in various spheres, including safety, mechanical, and civil engineering departments. Sir has also served as the Senior Deputy General Manager of South Central Railways and brought a sea of changes in the working of Vigilance Department by implementing various improved systems that ensure prompt investigation of complaints. Sri Mallya is the recipient of several awards and prizes for his performance during his career. Sir has completed various training programs in India and abroad, such as Specialized Training of Trainers program at Administrative Staff College of India, Hyderabad, Advanced Strategic Management program at Carnegie Mellon University, Pittsburgh, USA, and Advanced Training in Vigilance Investigation at the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel National Police Academy, Hyderabad. Sir is also a keen sports enthusiast and takes active role in their development. I welcome you, sir. Please start the proceedings with your inaugural address.
Very good morning to all the participants of this webinar. At the outset, I would just like to thank Mr. Ravibabu for inviting me for this program, and Subham Jain for just introducing me to the participants. So, a lot of eminent speakers are there after me. So, Professor Raghuram, former Director, IMB and Principal Academic Advisor, NRTI, Sri Abhijit Narendra, ED, Infra Railway Board, Sri Amber Dubey, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Civil Aviation, Sri Prashanth Bachu of Urban Transport Specialist, Sri Prasanna Patwardhan, CMD of the Prasanna Group, and other participants, some of whom I am familiar, but some are new to me. So a hearty welcome to this webinar. And as an introductory talk, so I first told Ravibabu what should I be speaking. So because all of you are experts in your respective fields. But then I thought I'll just talk out of my experience and see, logistics is a necessary value-adding activity for any product or service in the market. And logistic costs in India are of the order of about 14% of the GDP. We always feel that we are paying more for transportation here. And in the Europe and US, it is supposed to be 8 to 10%. We are a fast-growing economy, but for this COVID, we would have touched probably the double-digit growth rate. And for this, the logistic costs have to come down to the region of 7 to 8%. Now, logistic costs by themselves involve transportation, inventory carrying costs, handling and packaging costs, customer service costs, rentals, administration, information technology, and other miscellaneous costs, of which transportation is the big chunk, 45 to 50%. Now, this is where we come into the picture. In fact, in today's webinar, I find three prime modes of transport involved in logistic services: railways, aviation, and bus are involved. And I was just browsing the net and I found that out of the top 10 logistic service providers, 3 are from the railways. The top, of course, is UPS, United Parcel Service, which is what 440,000 employees spread across 220 countries. Second is Federal Express. Third is Japanese Railways Group. Fourth is DHL. Fifth is Union Pacific, which is the railway. There are 2 postal organizations of Germany and Italy. CSX is a railway-based transport in US again, and CN in Canada. So railway is extremely important in providing logistic services. However, the ground situation in our country is quite different. We are finding that from our heydays in the early 50s, 60s, prior to the development of roads, our share was almost up to 80%. And today, we are struggling to even keep up at 40% or even less. And some of the traditional commodities also, where we could do better, the market share is less. So what is that we are looking for? And the last 1 year dealing with in the COVID situation gave us a lot of time to think, realign ourselves to the market needs, realign ourselves to the specific requirements of different customers, and some things have come to light. See, ultimately, the service which we provide as a logistics service provider should result in the least total cost to the customer. And we have seen the entire market is very price sensitive. I can vouch that cement manufacturers, their costing is so tight that a few rupees here and there per bag makes all the difference. Whereas we do the costing in our own way. And we are basically bulk service providers. And in the bulk service, we forget the smaller customers. And during this pandemic, we have learned that we should be running mini rakes. We should be running parcel services to cater for different commodities. And there has to be orientation for different seasons, different parts of the country, the way we carry things. So the whole, it has been a good learning for the railways. And as a result of this, we did form business development units, and we have crossed the last year's freight of 1204 million tons. We have already crossed till date, and we are likely to end the year with 1230 million tons, which is the highest ever carried by Indian Railways. But this is not good enough, because in a pandemic year, yes, this may be all right, but we have to grow almost at the rate of 8 to 10% if we have to really make a dent. And for that, a good amount of work has to be done in improving the infrastructure, in making ourselves customer friendly, and providing the right kind of service. So today's topic I find is PPP in transport and logistics. Now, what is PPP? PPP involves basically collaboration between the government and private sector companies to finance, build, operate projects such as public transportation, networks, and so many other projects. Financing a project through public-private partnership can allow a project to be completed faster. Government has tried to give more boost to the PPP model, but has PPP model really worked? And within the PPP model, we have different combinations: BOT, BOO, BOOT, BOLT, DBFO, LDO, etc. Now, what has been the problem with the PPP projects? PPP projects are stuck with issues such as disputes in existing contracts, non-availability of capital, and regulatory hurdles related to acquisition of land. Regulation of PPP is not very good. PPP projects sometimes become sites of crony capitalism and means to acquire land by private players. Performance of PPP has been mixed. Loans for infrastructure projects are believed to comply a large share of non-performing asset portfolio of public sector banks. That's why it's not easy to get finances. PPP also is looked upon as the politically favored firms can only get into these projects. And there can be frequent negotiations between government and the private parties, which again leads to time and cost delays. So to make PPP work is another challenge. And there has been a committee, like so many other committees in the past nominated by the government, Vijay Kelkar committee, which has given some recommendations for the PPP models. So I listed out a few points which they have talked about. Contracts need to be focused more on service delivery instead of fiscal benefits. See, the customer is the king. We have to provide the service that he desires, not what we are able to give. Better identification and allocation of risks between the stakeholders. Prudent utilization of funds. Improved fiscal reporting. Cost effective in managing the risks. And to meet the other regulations which are laid down by the government. So basically, PPP, if we have been talking about it, we read about it at the time of the budget, but what actually happens, very few of us are aware of. And the time has come now where all the logistic providers have to partner each other to provide the end-to-end service. Like, and even an individual wants a door-to-door service. So are the big customers also. They also want an end-to-end service. Unfortunately, we work in compartments. Like railways think of only after the material comes to the goods shed, it is our responsibility. It comes to the goods shed and loaded, then only our responsibility starts. We carry it and dump it at the other end, and then it is the botheration of the customer or the service provider at the other end. So somehow we have not got into strategic partnership for providing the end-to-end service. And as a result of it, the investments in goods sheds for improving the facilities efficiency have not really happened. Of course, the last 1 year, I would say we have done a lot of work, and there is a change in mindset. And we have realized that if we have to get customers, we have to improve the goods sheds. We have to enter into partnerships for managing the goods sheds. And now that's a big area of a PPP model. So goods sheds in a PPP model would do well because they need not only cater for the rail customers, they can cater for the road customers also. I would say whatever lessons we have learned over a period of time, and especially in the difficult pandemic times, when fortunately, I mean, our country has survived because of good logistics. There was no shortage of any commodity anywhere in the country during this entire period, despite so many lockdowns, curfews, etc. The availability of food grains, availability of medicines, the special equipment to fight the pandemic, all those things were made available because the logistics was working even in these difficult times. So with this, I would now stop. I'll like to listen to the keynote speaker and the other speakers. And I would once again thank the Institute of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport through Mr. Ravibabu for inviting me for this inaugural talk. Thank you very much, and all the best for the webinar.
So thank you very much, sir. This is quite a perceptive and deep, insightful lecture that you have given in the short duration that was given to you. Thank you very much for taking time in your busy schedule. Now, our next speaker is Professor Raghuram, and Professor Raghuram, I will be introducing. Actually, introducing Professor Raghuram to the logistics personnel is something which is not there in the sense of anybody who is in the logistics more or less should be knowing Professor Raghuram because he has worked in all the domains of the logistics and their integration, and he is active in the academic field and he is also active in the industry. He He is regularly travels, meets the industry people. He is not a armchair theoretician or a ivory towered academician. So, having said that, uh, of course, I have special association with him. He is my guru, and then later friend. So, and his passion for logistics and for railways in general is so immense that, as far as his railway knowledge is concerned, he would outbid at least 90% or 99 percentile of other railway personnel. So much, and his passion is unbounded for railways. Similarly, in other sectors also, and to boot to it is are his academic credentials. He has done from is BTech from IIT Chennai, then IIM Ahmedabad, PGDBM, then PGDM, and then followed by PhD at Northwestern University, all leading institutes. So I request everybody to give due concentration, and now I request Professor Raghuram to take over. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you very much, and pleasure to be part of this session. Also, Utkarsh is there. I think he's going to be moderating after this. And it was a pleasure to listen to you, Mr. Mallya, because I presume you're there because I think a lot of points that you mentioned in some ways themselves state the problem and also point at the solutions. So we will talk about it. Yeah, so I just have a presentation, and let me go through that. So Ravi, who will be putting it up?
It is just coming up, sir. You just continue your talk, and then Sadiq will be putting it up, and he's just putting it.
Okay. So, I mean, first of all, I think it is, it is the government. It is the owner of whoever it is in the country, the owner in the generic sense, government, maybe railways, civil aviation, finance ministry, PMO, whatever. But one thing that's happened, of course, over 20 plus years is there is a common language that we want public-private partnerships. So now questioning PPPs in the sense of whether we need them, I think that's all. In fact, that time was over even by early 2000s. In fact, the telecom sector proved it beyond doubt that bringing in private involvement in what otherwise has the attributes of an infrastructure sector clearly established. I mean, today we are all able to do whatever we are doing. Our ability to overcome the COVID physical distancing, or our ability to, it's all a consequence of the fact that private investments have come in India in a big way in telecom. You and I own, the latest in iPhones or Samsung, the latest in laptops, internet connectivity, all that. Of course, it has still not penetrated all the way. And again, there are issues. Was it because government involvement was there in attempting to penetrate? Of course, our good friend, Mr. Shivasailam, was there as the additional secretary in telecom. So whatever. But I think PPPs are here at the highest levels in the political decision makers and in the bureaucracy. It is accepted. So the real issue is one is we must have a mindset to know why we want PPPs, and secondly, how to make it work. Let me just lay out why. Why I think many times there is still, are we wanting it because we want resource additionality, or do we want it because they bring in a greater customer orientation, which we are talking about. Mr. Mallya just referred to it, end-to-end supply chains and whatever. To me, it's very clear. It is to bring in that managerial efficiency, managerial efficacy that the private sector represents. Resource additionality is secondary. may be important, but secondary. And I think unless we are all in unison on that, yeah, then of course we have to worry about, whether there is crony capitalism, whether there is whatever, what are the checks and balances required. I'm sure there are always attendant problems. Now, the question to us is whether these attendant problems are the bigger ones, or doing infrastructure in a business as usual mode that we did until the 80s or early 90s is the way to do it, right? And at least in my mind, the answer there is very clear. Now, just to bring out the importance of infrastructure, I just scanned today's 2 newspapers that I get at home. And there were like 12 news items which I can attribute to infrastructure. And let me just put it out. So the Supreme Court directs Haryana government to pay some 1,900 crores to IL&FS because, you see, the authority of the Haryana government, called the Haryana Shahri Vikas Pradhikaran, HSVP, had not fulfilled its obligations to IL&FS, which was doing that Gurgaon metro. Now, of course, IL&FS itself now not doing well is another issue, but between these two entities. And so IL&FS decided to pull out of that contract. Now, HSVP, of course, have been holding back the termination payments. And, so we've made it, there's an extreme amount of difficulty for the entity that had come in to do a metro infrastructure, a BOT, a build and operate, and they have not been able to do it. And then it has gone, HSVP, of course, they handed it over to Delhi Metro. But then there is for the money that IL&FS had put in, they owe a termination payment. Now, HSVP takes the stance that, no, you have not fulfilled your obligations. There's that. So the fight goes on. And finally, it's gone to the Supreme Court. And now, actually, the same issue is there in Delhi Metro, the airport line, which, for whatever reason, I don't want to get into it, but the legal entanglement continues. And, the money that is owed to the private promoter who has invested and brought in the infrastructure for the airport line, the full payments from DMRC are yet to occur, because as a government entity, we think we have to fight till the last for whatever reason. Partly we are worried about vigilance, and we are worried about CAG, and worried about many other aspects possibly. And therefore, it just... So anyway, you can see, the whole sort of issues that come up. Okay, globally, of course, the hot news is about what's happening in Suez. And of course, Suez is the ship 400, one of the longest container ships carrying 20,000 containers, 400-meter long, has got stuck and sort of blocked the Suez Canal. So anyway, India is directly getting affected. All the 25 crew on board the ship are Indians, interestingly. Japanese owner, Chinese company, whatever, as global as you can get. And Indian, apart from that, is going to, Indian trade. 12% of global trade passes through the Suez Canal. And so many ships which have already entered the canal are all blocked in. In fact, there are many news items. One of them says that all the insurance companies who are associated with Suez Canal or with the ships that are stuck will probably, they use the word, may beggar the insurance companies. They're going to lose huge amounts of money. So, classic case of infrastructure, logistics, global trade. JICA has a news item says India needs to work on its project preparedness. Their biggest concern is that. And I'm sure the high-speed rail is one issue, where, I remember the fanfare. Japan itself had said 5 years. Then I think from India, we negotiated and we said 4 years. And all announcements. And, I think even the 4-year period is nearly ending, where work is to begin in a significant way. partly land acquisition issues, government of Maharashtra, political issues. Then they are saying, at least let us get on with the Gujarat part. Of course, some months ago, L&T got the biggest civil engineering contract ever awarded in India as a large chunk of the bullet train project and so on. So anyway, JICA, is in a way expressing that concern. And it is true not only there, I think wherever JICA is invested, metros and many other projects, Japan, dedicated freight corridors. Okay. Then it says, interesting issue. You see, we are privatizing. There is also asset monetization has come in, which is sort of an extended form. You can say PPP or somewhere between PPP and privatization and asset monetization. So BPCL has been sort of put on the block. And when they say they privatize, because there will be currently as a central government sector, you are getting subsidies. So now, in a way, sweetening the deal, the idea is they are saying, look, even when it becomes private for some period, as a transition, we may continue the subsidies. Go Air is wanting to go public, and, there are a lot of questions about Go Air's zone. And then recently there was a change in the top management, and, there are, of course, Go Air has not made it as big as some of the other airlines. Very interesting headline in today's paper, how the poor cope with road crashes. And again, it points out, there's a highly researched paper, and they talk about when an accident happens and somebody passes away in a family, what is the economic impact on that family? And in any case, a large number of people who get hit by road fatalities are from the poorer domain, poorer segment. And then, even if compensation is announced, by the time the bureaucracy is moved and legal issues are addressed, it could be 5 years before the money, the affected party sees the money. And the conclusive proof of that paper is that the economic status of the already poor people has been going down. So, road safety is a big issue in India. And, we just need to address it, take the bull by the horns, and, which is not really happening. Southern Egypt, Egypt is having a double Suez Canal, and then trains collided, killing 32 people. Xiaomi to make electric vehicles, China, they can sort of enter the market once they decide, getting in big way. Then, advertising, there are environmental activists in the US who are going, they're saying Chevron is coming up with a series of ads saying how they are doing a great job in, environmental accountability and all that, while at the same time they are leaking some of their unprocessed stuff or whatever into the bay near California and, whatever. So I think, and they are actually saying that these ads should be taken off. In fact, this is getting to be a, who's going to look at the ad, the accountability that are companies on one hand doing something, and even to divert attention, they may be putting ads, in a different way. And this is a very environmentally, infrastructurally significant issue of, sustainability and so on. Of course, PM is in Bangladesh, and, we've been having all these water treaties. And so again, there is something about Bangla water treaty. And we believe that we would like to have very smooth, easy relationships so that we can use the Bangladesh water movement to go from, the West Bengal area to Assam, or even from, say, the Chittagong port into Assam, which earlier used to be very easy access to the states in that part. And, we have been trying a lot to smoothen this. Buses today, since there is a focus on buses, this is some interesting headline, business goes bust or up bus, because private bus companies in India, they've really had it bad. for 4 or 5 months, there were not bus trips. And then even when it was allowed to be started with the 50% occupancy norm, it doesn't make it viable for them. Many of them are moving out of the business. Of course, earlier in many states, there are still regulatory challenges, whether the private party, what is the arrangement with the private party? I mean, DTC, Delhi Transport Corporation, had certain models. Then, of course, you were bringing in small owner-based buses, which I'm not sure really did justice, because you might want bigger players so that their reputation is at stake. See, many times in India, when we want to bring in private party, government gets a bit mixed up. We bring in private party, but we say we want to be inclusive. I mean, inclusion is good, but then, you want to bring a one owner bus operator, two bus owner operators or whatever, now that may not. Of course, there are larger players. Then you allowed contract carriages, meaning some point to point, not really like transportation, but actually it was like transportation. So everybody turned their head one way or the other. In many states now, stage carriages have been permitted. But in spite of it, I think, because at least government will bail them out. The whole issue is what happens to the private players. Right. So I think these were just one day's headlines. Fine. Of course, some broader current happenings, I thought, we can reflect on. Dedicated freight corridors, of course, big issue. When do we get the Western and Eastern? And of course, as segments of it are being opened up, it's getting a lot of visibility. But, there are still many challenges. Of course, when I say choice of alignment, this is for the future corridors. In fact, the National Rail Plan had, for example, the West-East corridor, they had said all the way from Palghar to Dankuni, but then, the budget has provided from Bhusawal. So there are some, even within the government, how exactly to look at things. One open challenge is still the Sonnagar-Dankuni segment of the Eastern Corridor, which right from beginning was supposed to go on a PPP model. In fact, I have another big issue that every public fora I get to talk about freight corridors I bring out. I mean, for a new standard setting infrastructure, how could we as government or as Ministry of Railways define different standards of the electrical pole setting for the Western Corridor and Eastern Corridor? The standard ISO container double stacking is allowed only in the Western Corridor. Eastern Corridor, for some concept of being penny wise, pound foolish is the best way I can describe it. We said we will save cost because the driving cargo is expected to be coal. But already by the time the EDFC is coming in, coal may be losing itself as a source of energy for electricity. And actually, container may again be the driving cargo, with Eastern ports getting a lot of attention. So, but then we are stuck with single stacking of container trains in the EDFC. Now, I'm saying at least Sonnagar Dankuni, when you do the PPP, I hope many railway people are listening, we will do at least Sonnagar Dankuni as double stacking, so that from the Dankuni side where the port is, at least up to Sonnagar, we'll be able to move double stacked trains. Fine. New Delhi-Mumbai Expressway, massive project, of course, has not gone on PPP basis, contract basis, because I guess for such a large project in India, still bandwidth issues of private party is there. But here, it's going on at full speed, high-tech investments that the contractors have brought in, environmental issues. That, for example, it goes through some of the important tiger parks, and the way they're doing it is they're just going to go underground, tunnel the whole thing, hopefully not affecting the surface in any way. Choice of material, is issues, various types, cement versus bitumen, and then below that, what kind of other materials you're going to put in. Then the whole issue of e-tolling. I mean, even though e-tolling has come in, which is a good thing, but we are still way behind countries where you can just do the e-tolling at full speed. Whereas in India, many times, Ahmedabad, Vadodara, I'm constantly moving. There are many times when the FASTag doesn't work, and then the guy has to come out, do something, and then there are people arguing. It's so, okay, there are things that we need to iron out, but we are moving in that direction. Right. Then, of course, the PMGSY. Today, I think that's been one of the more successful projects, I must say. There was very good oversight on it. The political influences were minimized. It was done with a lot of objective criteria. And of course, one of the issues now is, instead of many villages being connected by one-sided connection, because you wanted connectivity in the first place. But now we find that, many, from a transportation point of view, that is the service point of view, buses are not willing to go to a village and then come back. So we are saying, maybe if you have two-sided connectivity, from one village, go to another village, come back to the highway. So this idea of two-sided connectivity in future phases of PMGSY. Again, there are choice of material issues there. Cold chains, warehousing, all these are important infrastructural issues. Warehousing is a huge opportunity for asset monetization in India, with in the 60s and 70s with CWC, FCI, state warehousing corporations putting up warehousing with lots of land, railway connectivity, and, primarily targeted on food grain, but over years, not getting the due maintenance, efficiency going down. It's a huge opportunity for bringing in private play who will be far more market oriented. For example, government warehouses are not in a position to get warehouse receipt compliance, so that people who are storing it there can actually get working capital or can do trading while stocks are in warehouse, because that enhances the value of warehousing. But private parties, I know the example of Rajasthan State Warehousing Corporation, where a private party came in and they made 1/3 of the warehouses on which they got control on a PPP basis, made them negotiable warehouse receipt compliant, and has improved the value of the warehousing. So, and then there is lots of land you can expand, so private parties don't have to worry about getting more land. You can put silos, you can go high rather than the traditional warehousing. And why limit it to food grains, larger agricultural products, perishables, non-agricultural e-commerce? There is a huge opportunity out there. Fine. Of course, there is this BharatNet. I briefly mentioned it. Let's move on. So in this asset monetization, sale of Concor has come in. Sale of Concor, now, for example, Concor had been vested with low-cost land. Earlier there was a mention why PPPs don't work. Container train operations is a classic example why anybody applying their mind with a little intelligence could have said right in the beginning, it's not going to get its due. You have Concor on one hand with subsidized land, with land made freely available, and you are allowing now private parties and say, come on, compete with Concor, but buy land at market prices. I'm going to charge you one heck of a lot when you want to make a railway connection with the main line. I'm going to see, about maintenance. I will have restrictive, you can only have your thing maintained in a certain workshop. All kinds of issues where, whether we thought through the detail or not, but tied down these private players. So anyway, Concor is going for private. One thing good. So railways are now saying, hey, all that land has to now be viewed at commercial rates. So what has Concor done? They have said, hey, I don't think I need 60 plus, container terminals, because some of them are sitting on land where I don't have enough traffic, so I'm ready to return the land. And in others where they're keeping the land and the land is now at a higher price, they are telling customers, I'm going to have to charge you more. Now, okay, you are readying Concor for privatization, but I would still worry. If Concor is going to be sold as a single entity, I can tell you today that it is still going to create a problem, because you're going to create an imbalanced, you're going to have one large player with many small private players who are there. Okay, the large player was earlier government and had certain, because of the proximity with government. But even if you make it private, there is a problem. And I will only take you to the example of what happened in the United States when AT&T, when the competition came in long distance telecom. They said if AT&T is competing, it will simply squish, finish off the others. So they broke AT&T into smaller units. I think Concor needs to be broken down into 2 entities or 3 entities before it gets sold. If you want those other 15 players, of whom maybe 5 or 6 are really able to do business to actually survive. Sale of India, now monetization of DFC, very interesting. They're saying we can look at DFC like an airport and I'll sell time slots on it. Excellent. So that means you're basically selling a path. And of course, when DFC was created, there was discussion, why couldn't it have been directly created under a PPP mode? But for whatever reason, Ministry of Railways said, no, we're going to do it, and so on. So next slide. Okay, there is this huge national infrastructure pipeline, 100 trillion we expect. Variety of areas are listed there. Let me not get into the detail. We are aware of it. And as one of my good friends wrote in an article recently, he calls the infrastructure pipeline that was announced in 19 and the asset monetization policy announced in 21 is a nice jugalbandi. So yeah, I think in some ways, it will sort of, if we are able to carry through these policies appropriately. So broadly, so let me, just to give some takeaways. So to me, infrastructure, I have economic infrastructure, social, health, education, many of those will come under social. We're not talking about that. Actually, the economic infrastructure, the defining attribute is capital investments are required upfront, huge capital investments. And that is an additional challenge, especially if you're going to bring in private party. And one needs to be sympathetic and empathetic towards that. So the most fundamental things about making PPPs work, Mr. Mallya mentioned that we have to put service and then money. Yes, we have to put service requirements, but let's be clear that anybody who's doing business or an activity is going to do it because it's going to be financially sustainable. You can go to town talking about service, but who will be doing it that way? Even Indian Railways won't do it that way, because ultimately Indian Railways also needs to sort of survive and keep its head above water, right? So financials are important. And in fact, the challenge is, can I bring the service expectation and the financial viability into alignment? And that challenge is for the policymakers and the authorities to think about in as much detail as they can. One simple framework here. Most private parties will come with a minimum expectation of a return, and I call that as the hurdle rate. It may vary depending on the company, depending on the location, depending upon the maturity of the business in which they are. Now, there is economic rate of return and financial rate of return in any infrastructure project. Now, if both are above the hurdle rate, no issues. Telecom, I think, is a good example. Many port berths were a good example. Now, if both are below the hurdle rate, it is not for PPP. Government has to still continue to be there. Space is a good example. Maybe the early Hyperloop. Though, interestingly, in the US, you see, there is so much entrepreneurial element that whether it was telecom or Hyperloop, private parties are doing it, because there are people who have deep pockets and they have a sense, they have a feeling that they must do something innovative, even if it is at a high cost. But I think in India, that may not occur. Then, if financial rate of return is above the hurdle rate and economic rate of return is below, then you will get private players, but you have to make them more accountable. Say nuclear power plants, because economic rate of return is below. So you have to tell them to do certain things that will mitigate consequences of their project. And so the economic rate of return in that sense of the whole project has to go up. I could have projects where economic rate of return is above the hurdle rate. Metro is a good example where it is valued as important for a city or maybe a BRTS, but financial rate of return may be below. Then I must take the surplus in the economic rate of return and give it to the private party to step up their financial rate of return. Maybe like Yamuna Expressway, where I had land pockets, or where property tax portions can be handed over to the private party, and so on. Yeah, I think let me go further. Move this. I'll move this too. Right. So just to, on an ending note. So infrastructure development, first of all, it has both technological and managerial. When I say managerial, I include policy and all that. And one has to be clued into both. To me, there are 8 important elements of, in where a lot of detail is required. And India today actually has enough experience. Probably globally as a country, India has the maximum PPP experience, successful or not. Project structuring is the most fundamental. What are the elements of the project? If I'm going to sell off Concor, what are the elements of selling that in the best interests of container movement in the country? Risk identification, assessment and management. Okay, earlier risk issues were, especially as government investments, we probably never even talked about it. But today it's a whole body of knowledge. Financial appraisal and sourcing, tendering and bidding processes, concession and contractual agreements needs careful thought. How many projects have gone, unwell because we've not done enough here? Now,
sir, last 1 minute, sir.
Yeah. And then project management itself, post-project activities, issues of ownership, issues of, Bombay Airport changing hands, Bangalore Airport changing hands, issues of dispute resolution. We talked about it. So I'll cut this slide, go to the next slide. So just before ending, I want to leave one more thought here. We are talking PPPs, public-private partnership. Even the Tejas trains, people thought was a PPP. Media went to town saying privatization. It was not. It was done by IRCTC. It was not open competitive bidding. Yes, we learnt certain things from there. Today, passenger train operations, we are going in for privatization. We don't have a regulator in place. And if I were to take a call, railways have not done enough thinking to put the PTOs out there. It's not going to be easy, right? So another related issue, should you allow public sector to bid airport projects? Should AAI bid for airport projects? They are coming in through the PPP route. Should IRCTC bid for PPP projects? These are important questions because it defies the definition of public-private partnership. Okay, let me leave it here and thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Wonderful exposition. Both your emotional attachment can be seen in the exposition. In addition to that, lot of issues that you posed, which are very, very relevant for whatever PPP that we are taking forward. Now we move over to the railway sector, to Sri Abhijit Narendra. He will be introduced by Sri Avinash. Narendra, please keep time in view. Avinash, over to you.
Everyone.
Yeah, we are listening to you. We are getting you.
Yes, sir. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. It's my privilege to introduce Sri Abhijit Narendra, sir, IRTS. Sir is currently working as Executive Director, Infrastructure at Ravibabu. Sir has diverse educational background. He has done his Bachelor's in Science and then Bachelor's in Law from University of Delhi. Sir has very diversified work experience in the Indian Railways, spreading across Northern Railway, North Central, and Northwestern Railway. Sir has also worked as Director Coordination in the Railway Board. After that, he has worked in CRIS before joining his present assignment as Executive Director, Infrastructure at the Railway Board. I welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Avinash. I'll keep my, since the bandwidth is pretty low, so I'll keep my audio only on. Good morning, everybody present in this August gathering. The topic of discussion relates to my work area, and I take it as an opportunity to learn from the ideas of all the experts present here. It's also an opportunity to know about the action envisaged and being taken by the in the infrastructure sector by other modes of transport. As regards railway sector, it is interesting to note that railways in India started as a private enterprise. However, independent India witnessed railways only as a state enterprise. The Railway Act also defines railway system for public carriage of goods and passengers within the purview of Ministry of Railways. Unlike other modes of transportation like road, shipping, or aviation, in railway sector, it's not only the infrastructure, which is both fixed as well as movable, is largely owned by government, but Indian Railways is also the sole operator of trains on this network. It is imperative that this huge infrastructure of around 67,000 route kilometers, which carries about 1,200 million tons of cargo and more than 8 billion passengers per annum, requires significant investment for further expansion of network as well as modernization of infrastructure, fixed infrastructure, as well as the fleet of rolling stock. It was referred in the budget 2019 that the railway system in this country requires approximately rupees 50 lakh crores in the next 12 years, like till 2030, for infrastructure augmentation and modernization work to enable improved delivery of service to passengers and freight. This level of investment has to come through extra budgetary resources involving partnership with private sector also. Though we have been referred to as an illustration of substantially closed government enterprise, being government department, which is owning the infrastructure as well as operating service, still, infusion of extra budgetary resources and private participation is not new to us. When we trace history of past 20 years only, we find illustrations of Pipavav Rail Port Rail Connectivity, Mundra Port Rail Connectivity, Hassan Bangalore Rail Line, which were executed in partnership, either in joint venture or through entirely private investment. This participative scheme was further proliferated during the period 2005-06 to 10-11, when 5 other different projects were launched, which associated stakeholders, including state government, and the joint venture companies were formed. Rail Vikas Nigam Limited, a railways public sector unit associated in joint ventures, and Kutch Railway, Bharuch Dahej Line, Krishnapatnam, Haridaspur Paradeep, Angul Sukinda rail projects were launched. Further, in 2012, a participative policy was issued by ministry encompassing 5 different models for execution of rail connectivity projects through extra budgetary resources, partnership from stakeholders and investors. These 5 different models were non-government railway model, joint venture model, customer funded model, BOT, and annuity models. Rail connectivity projects have also been assigned under these models for execution, and coal companies, ports, cluster of industries have come forward to provide rail connectivity, while state governments, local bodies, PSUs also participated as stakeholders for the development of new line or gauge conversion projects. In all these projects, train operation continues to remain with railways. The PPP mode has been found, this kind of PPP mode has been found quite successful here, and especially in providing last mile rail connectivity to many ports and industrial clusters. Till now, 14 such projects costing around 9,000 crore have been completed. 10 more projects costing around 20,000 crore are under execution, which includes coal connectivity and port connectivity projects also. And in addition, 8 more projects costing around 14,000 crore have already been given in principal approval. In addition to rail connectivity, there are other areas where private participation has been taken, like manufacturing of locomotives. We have taken initiative of two different initiatives. One is like electric locomotive factory was set up at Madhepura, a joint venture of Ministry of Railways and Alstom, with a capacity to manufacture 120 locomotives of 12,000 horsepower per annum. It was agreed that 800 such locomotives will be manufactured in 11 years. So far, 76 locomotives have been supplied. Similarly, the diesel locomotive factory at Madhaura was set up under joint venture with Ministry of Railways and General Electric, with a capacity to manufacture 120 locomotives per annum. And the company is required to supply 700 locomotives of 4,500 horsepower and 300 locomotives of 6,000 horsepower in 11 years. So far, 252 locomotives of 4,500 horsepower and 31 locomotives of 6,000 horsepower have been supplied. In the area of rolling stock also, Ministry of Railways has introduced various enabling schemes for investment in rolling stock as a part of freight marketing initiative. Liberalized wagon investment scheme, general purpose wagon investment scheme, special freight train operator scheme, automobile freight train operator schemes, they are in vogue, associating industries in procurement of wagons. Approval for 444 such rakes have been given so far. 131 of them have already been inducted. In addition, railways have also allowed container train operators for providing service to the customers. These container train operators have invested in rolling stock for transportation of container on railway network. And locomotion for all these rakes are provided by Indian Railway only. More than 500 such rakes are owned by these container train operators, which are plying on Indian Railway network. Another area where private participation has been sought, that's the area of station redevelopment. It's a significant area where around 120 stations have been identified. 61 stations are being handled by Rail Land Development Authority. 60 more stations by this company, Indian Railways Station Development Corporation. Works at Habibganj and Gandhinagar, they are in advanced stage. Railways have also associated private partners for development of freight terminals. 69 such private freight terminals have been commissioned. 44 more have been approved. In addition, the container train operators have also been mandated to develop their terminal, and 87 such terminals have been developed by these container train operators. Ministry has also issued a policy for development of railway goods sheds on PPP mode recently in 2020, and actions are being taken accordingly. Next is the area of private passenger trains. It's the most recent area where private participation is sought, and the scheme envisages operation of 152 train service divided into 12 clusters by private operator. Scope broadly includes designing, engineering, procurement, financing, operation, maintenance of passenger train through distributed power or power heads, minimum of 16 coaches, and the operators will be selected through a two-stage competitive bidding process comprising RFQ and RFP, which is already underway. In this area, the future prospect, if we see that the prospective area where public-private partnership can be extended or can be thought of in the area of future dedicated freight corridor project and future high-speed rail projects. Presently, part of Eastern DFC from Sonnagar to Dankuni, which is 538 kilometers, has been planned for execution of PPP. The requisite processing is underway. Further, government has undertaken preparation of detailed project report for 4,000 kilometer future DFC. This includes East Coast corridor from Kharagpur to Vijayawada, east-west corridor from Bhusawal to Kharagpur Dankuni, and north-south corridor from Itarsi to Vijayawada. On receipt of the outcome of detailed project report, including projected financials of the individual projects, decision of sanction will be taken, including the mode of implementation. Possibility of taking up the project on PPP mode is certainly there based on the projected return after the DPR is finalized. Similarly, preparation of DPR has also been undertaken for future high-speed rail or semi-high-speed rail we call. 7 such corridors have been identified: Delhi-Varanasi, Delhi-Ahmedabad, Mumbai-Nagpur, Mumbai-Pune, Hyderabad, Chennai-Bangalore, Mysore, Delhi-Chandigarh, Amritsar, and Varanasi-Patna, Kolkata. That roughly it's around 5,000 kilometers of the entire length. Again, on the outcome of DPR, a decision regarding taking up the project will be taken, including the mode of execution. There are illustrations of execution of HSR project also on PPP mode in different parts of the world. We have the draft National Rail Plan is also in public domain, seeking comments, and it envisages creation of capacity ahead of demand in order to raise the modal share of railways. So action pursuant to this objective will enable creation of capacity by augmenting rail infrastructure, and this will certainly require more and more private investment in rail sector in partnership and enhanced and mature level of public-private partnership.
Abhijit, 30 seconds more.
It's done. Thank you, sir.
Oh,
thank you, sir.
Thank you, Abhijit. Thank you, Abhijit. Thanks a lot. That's quite a wonderful overview of what is happening exactly in the railways. That's nice. Now we move over to Amber Dubey. He is Joint Secretary, Ministry of Civil Aviation. He will be introduced by Sri Nikhil. Then after the introduction, Amber, over to you. Nikhil.
Thank you, sir. To all the distinguished speakers, guests and audience in YouTube, a very good afternoon. It's my honor to introduce our next distinguished speaker, Sri Amber Dubey, sir. Sri Amber Dubey, sir, is Joint Secretary at Ministry of Civil Aviation, Government of India. He is an alumnus of IIT Bombay and IIM Ahmedabad, has a professional experience of over 28 years. At Ministry of Civil Aviation, Sri Dubey, sir, is looking after drones, aerospace, manufacturing, MRO, flying schools, IT and skill development. He is also acting Vice Chancellor for Rajiv Gandhi National Aviation University at Amethi. Earlier, Sri Dubey, sir, was India Head of Aerospace and Defense at Global Consultancy Firm KPMG. While at KPMG, Sri Dubey, sir, worked closely with MOCA in drafting Vision 2040, National Civil Aviation Policy and Regional Connectivity. In 2012, Sri Dubey, sir, was honored with valuable contribution to Indian aviation by then Civil Aviation Ministry. First, I request Sri Dubey, sir, to take the stage and share his ideas and experiences. Over to you.
Dubey, so Amber, please keep the time in view. Thank you.
No, in fact, I'll make it even easy for you. Let's make it interactive because I think whatever had to be said is already said. Okay, so me going on and on about PPP makes no sense. If there are some questions, if you can ask, we'll make it a little more interactive. Otherwise, Saturday afternoon, people will get very bored listening to a Babu go all over again.
The question session will follow. Utkarsh will ask, but if you can give a quick overview of the sector, aviation sector in totality, that would be good for the audience. Huh?
Okay. So I think since everybody flies, everybody knows that aviation is at the forefront of the PPP. We are very clear that in line with the current government's overall policy direction, we believe in less government and more governance, and also the fact that business is best done by businessmen and not by the government. We don't want to be the umpire and a batsman and a bowler all at the same time. So we'll be more of an umpire, where our job is more in terms of policy and converting that policy into legislation and addressing the two watchdogs, Parliament and the courts and the public and the media at large, and focus just on that. And the airports, the airlines, the cargo, the MRO, the flying schools, every part, every ground handling, every part of aviation should ideally be done by, because each of these activities are cutting edge commercial activities. We are a 24/7 sector, like most transportation sectors. There's no holy Diwali for us. And So it's a very, very demanding sector. Plus also there are human lives. So we carry people in a balloon. We put them in a balloon and then take them from Delhi to Hyderabad or to London or New York. So it's a very, very cutting edge technology, highly sensitive. The projectiles move at a very high speed, almost 800 kilometers an hour, 10 times of what you drive on the highway. So this is best done by businessmen, by cutting edge people, and that is best done through PPP. And we remain as policymakers and regulators. So that's the broad design. Now, in airports, we all know, yes, it started with Cochin, which is fantastic, but it's still controlled by the government. And the real ones happened in Hyderabad and Bangalore in 2004. And then in 2006, we signed a contract for Delhi, Bombay, which is almost unthinkable that the government of India will actually give out Delhi and Bombay, but happened. And then it took almost like 16 years for the next brownfield PPP. And when 6 airports, 4 of them 5 of them state capitals plus Mangalore was given out. And we had that usual drama of all the court cases and public protests and all that, but all that is now taken care of. And parallelly, there was also PPP happening at the state level. So for greenfield airports, the stated policy is that we will not get airport authority to come in, and we'll collaborate with the state governments. The state governments, because they are the ones who take the brunt of the responsibility in terms of land acquisition. Everybody knows how painful land acquisition is. Because if I'm a politician, I acquire the land today, I become very unpopular where I acquire the land. And the benefits are reaped by someone who actually cuts the fita, as we call it, does the ribbon cutting 5, 6, 7 years down the line. So I, as the current politician, will take the brunt, the brickbat, and the bouquets will be with the guy 5, 6, or 7 years down the line when the airport actually functions. So that's why it's a very sensitive work. It's done at the state level, plus also law and order, various other issues are actually dealt at the state level. So the stated policy now is that all these new airports which are coming up, I was personally involved in the Goa second airport, the Mumbai second airport, the Vizag second airport, and all these are now done at the state level, where the center only provides oversight, support, and then for all the central functions like customs, immigration, security, CISF, etc., and various other approvals and bilaterals and diplomatic and external affairs issues. So all those are handled by the center, and it's a very nice example of a center-state collaboration that happens, like we've seen in case of the 3 airports I mentioned. And now recently there's this Jewar airport, which will be Delhi's second airport. Actually not Delhi's second airport, because that's a neighboring state, UP. But effectively it comes under the National Capital Region and cater to the same audience. So this is on the airport side. Enough has been said. So, and most people are aware of what's happening there. This has only created world-class airports. The exploitation of the resources is extremely high. Maybe that's 10 to 15 times of what airport authority was doing, because airport authority, with all due respect, I mean, they are not the same people. Many of those airport authority people are the ones who are actually running these airports at under the private leadership. But being government servant, we all know that their hands are tied, and you can't. There are hundreds of approvals that you take for even a 10 rupee or 100 rupee acquisition that you have to do. So that is just not the way you can operate in a 24/7 high-speed, real-time aviation sector. Efficiency has gone up. Rewards and punishments happen very quickly. You can order and take out contracts by just lifting the phone. So these are the various advantages, and because of which we have seen these world-class airports coming up, and our airports were in the top 120, we ranked 110 plus out of 120. Now they're in the top 2, top 3. All these routine airports. I mean, in every award after award, whether it's Skytrax or ACI, ASQ awards, everywhere you see Indian airports now being right on the top. So this has been a great success. Yes, of course, we had those issues about tariff, because anytime a new regime change and such a radical shift happens, what you call in typical consulting, the paradigm shift. So whenever there's a paradigm shift, there's always some teething trouble. And yes, and gradually it's getting sorted out. The latest innovation was that we moved away from this very intrusive cost plus tariff determination system, and also the bidding was on revenue share. So we have now completely gone away from this revenue share concept, because even defining the revenue can be opened up. I mean, 2 chartered accountants can fight for the next 100 years whether a particular line item worth 100 rupees is actually revenue or a reimbursement or a sale of this or sale of that or insurance proceed. And you can and there are 10,000 such transactions happening on a daily basis at an airport, with hundreds of flights landing and hundreds of vendors and hundreds of concessionaires operating at the airport. So with hundreds and thousands of transactions happening, I mean, there's no way somebody can do an intrusive accounting, and why do that? So if you see in the latest airport bids that have happened, these are all on a PPF basis, per passenger fee. Just tell us on a per passenger basis how much you'll pay. Let there be a fight out between the top bidders, and the one who pays the highest takes it. So, and this includes aeronautical, non-aeronautical, future commercial, what you will do 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the line. We leave it to the bidders. And because it's very easy to calculate, all I have to do is to multiply this PPF rate with the number of passengers. And number of passengers, every passenger is accounted for when you enter or leave the airport. So it's very easy accounting. Gone are those huge amounts of court cases and legal legislation. I mean, all kinds of legal troubles and media and parliament furors. All that is gone by just one stroke of a pen saying we'll not do revenue share. Now we will shift to a per passenger fee. So that's on the airport side. But what is not known is that we also do a lot of PPP on the non-airport side. If you look at airlines now, if Air India, now on one hand, it can be called a classical disinvestment process, but I would still call it a PPP because if you look at the debt amount of 60, 70,000, I don't know, I mean, it's difficult to even put a number there. And I'm sure there are very smart people, chartered accountants who are actually going through it right now in the data room. So 50, 60, 70,000 crore, no power on earth. Even the richest sheikh from the Middle East can actually come and buy it at 70,000 crores. So who's going to ultimately take care of it? So a lot of that, a huge bulk of this will actually be picked up by the government and by the taxpayer. All the people all the nice people on this call, you are the ones who will pay for that. So I would still call it a PPP. Air India transaction is not just a sale of equity or a transfer of share certificate from the President of India to a Tata or an Ajay Singh or whosoever wins it. It is PPP. Okay, then what about Pawan Hans? There also, if there are huge losses, huge debts, or whatever in the past, okay, a lot of that will be picked up by you and me as taxpayers to be finally made good enough for bidders or attractive enough for bidders to come and take it. I would call Pawan Hans also a PPP. Then on cargo, we have this AI class, Airport Authority Cargo and Logistics Services, which is a joint venture company. It's actually a subsidiary of AI, and they in turn get into lots of business deals with the various operators and the cargo terminal operators. That is PPP. All the cargo terminals themselves are all not run by the GMRs and GVKs or Fairfax. They're actually run by the Chelebis and by the CSCs. So that again is PPP. That again has brought in very the high quality services and infrastructure and temperature control stuff and lots of now exotic stuff, and the livestock is now going abroad because of these experiments, which was not happening before the PPP happened. I would also call RCS Udan. If you look at the regional connectivity scheme, it is a classic case of PPP, where the routes are decided by the airlines. So we're going to take the risk of operating that route, putting their aircraft and their pilots and staff and ground handling staff at that Mufassil airport, that small town, say a Bellary, Bidar, or a Bhatinda, or a Bareilly. And if it doesn't work, there's a huge money to be paid. And on the ticket, almost for half the seats, 60 to 70% of the amount is again paid by taxpayers like you and me. Actually, it's not taxpayers, but it's actually cross-subsidization, because we collect money on the trunk routes and then put that into the fund. And from the RCS fund, we then pay the airlines. So it's actually money going from airlines to airlines, but it's still transfer. And people do pay for some of these, for all the routes that are operating on RCS. And you'll be very surprised if I tell you, I was actually fortunate to be part of it when it was being designed in 2015 and 2016. It was finally launched by the Honorable Prime Minister, the Shimla-Delhi flight in 2017. And in 3.5 years, at that time, many times people used to ask, because both Indigo and some of the other leading airlines used to poo-poo the idea, saying it's all bullshit, it's not going to happen, doesn't make sense. A lot of economists, a lot of people said, I mean, you're distorting the market, won't happen. You won't even get 5 lakh people. Just yesterday, I was just looking at the numbers. 61 lakh people have flown on Udan flights. I mean, I'll just repeat the number. 61 lakh people have flown on Udan flights over the last 3.5 years. So one can't really call it a bullshit scheme, which is just meant for cheap politics or publicity. So, I mean, numbers have their own way, and these are all the numbers are on our ministry website. They are updated literally every 15 days. So you're most welcome to look at the number of routes, number of new airports which have come up, which for the last 70 years, they had never seen an aircraft, but they are now connected. And now we are getting to water drones and heliports also. So that's on the RCS Udan. Cargo, I've already spoken about. Ground handling, and even I'm conscious of time, and I also have to get into a meeting now. Even on ground handling, we have AI SATS, which again is a public-private partnership between, say, Air India and SATS of Singapore. Some people come from, the leadership comes from SATS, and the bulk of the people are actually Indians. And we try and do a good job, at least at the top 4 or 5 airports that they operate in. My last point is about flying training school. Some of you who are tracking aviation would have noted that just about last week, we opened the bids for 9 slots at 5 airport authority airports. Most of them are in South and Central, basically Kalburgi, Jalgaon, Belgavi, and Lilabari in Assam, and one more I'm forgetting. So these are the airports where we have low traffic, low interference from civil and military traffic. And anyway, these are underutilized assets, and also because they're in South and they're less affected by weather conditions like poor visibility or fog or monsoons, etc. So these there was a Fali Major Air Chief Marshal Fali Major Committee which actually identified several airports, and the first lot we picked up these 5 airports. And you'll be very surprised, because we thought even if 2 or 3 of them out of the 9 slots at 5 airports, even if 5 are picked up, will be fantastic. Actually, all 9 were picked up, and we're very happy because right now we are facing a problem that half of our pilots, or I would say half, at least 30-35% of our pilots are actually coming from outside. In the sense, these are Indians who go abroad and then come back, entailing a huge loss of forex. And just by this one stroke of a pen and these 9 slots going out, even if they produce just about 30 to 40 pilots per deficit, which Indigo and SpiceJet face, because they are bringing in the aircraft and they need the pilots. So this again is public-private partnership, where the land comes from airport authority. Lots of the runway and the taxiways will be built by AI, and the hangar and the aircraft and all the running of the schools will be done completely by the private sector. So and last point is that IGRUA, which is our largest flying club, flying academy in Amethi, Raebareli. That also we have just drafted the cabinet note, is under circulation in the key ministries, and most probably in the next 3 to 4 months, even that will be put on PPP. It's the largest flying club, beautiful facility in Amethi, and that again we want a private party to come and run it in a world-class way. What I'll do is I'll stop here. Utkarsh, over to you, sir.
Okay,
Amber, you forgot Khajuraho. How could you forget Khajuraho?
Khajuraho. You always need some guru to knock some sense into the shishya. So thank you so much, sir.
Okay. So Amber,
those who don't know, I mean, of course, we've all students of Professor Raghuram, so sir, Guru Pai Lagin. Thanks for, it's an honor to share screen space with you. Utkarsh.
Yeah. So Amber, since you have had significant experience on the private side, and I'll probably take you back there a little bit. So how do you see the scenario different between the way that the international experiences are there with PPPs and the way they happen in India, especially in the aviation sector?
It's very difficult to compare, because see, if you look at the largest market is US, and US method, it's actually, I don't know whether you call it PPP or what, because it's actually run by the municipality. So New York, it's run by the New York Port Trust, or the 3 ones, the big ones, the LaGuardia, JFK, and the third one. Okay, they all New Jersey. They all run by the port authority. So it's typically done by the district. It's almost like the railway station or a bus station. Okay, so railway station is still railways here in India, like the bus station. Bus station is typically done by the state government and or by the local urban local body. So that's the US. China is again a different system, government system. In UK, the European ones are a little bit closer to us. So there again, they gave it out, and then they discovered that Heathrow and a couple of other airports given to one Ferrovial, and that became another monopoly. So again, they forced them to break it up, and then they had only Heathrow, and the others were taken out. So it's very difficult to compare with what others have done. But I would say we charted our own journey, started from Cochin, which was, though it is a PPP, but of course the CEO and a lot of things are controlled actually by the local Kerala government. But the others, the Hyderabad, Bangalore in 2004 and 2006, Delhi, Bombay, these are true PPP, where government just plays the regulatory role. And you'll be surprised, like those who are tracking it know that now the current government says, why should I hold even 26% stake? What the hell am I adding value there? And if you take 26%, you even have to put a government babu there or somebody from airport authority there. What value will he add? He's also scared. I mean, you pass some resolution, and if it can create a problem 5 years later, you will also be in the dock. So government is saying, if we are anyway not adding any value, okay, and I'm making a huge money from revenue share and from the economic growth and the taxes that I get, and fuel, I mean, aviation fuel also gets us to 20 to 30% revenue. So why the hell should we be taking a boat seat? So even in lucrative, in pre-COVID times, this itself would have been a scandal. You see, government is giving gold away at throwaway prices and blah blah blah. But now people understand that if you have to maintain the social welfare focus of the government, of course we have to let go of these assets, and we'll monetize that. So see, so your question is very good, but there are no easy answers, and frankly, I would say they are not even comparable to some of the PPPs that other countries have done. The other countries who are leading aviation powers, especially like city-states like the Singapores and the Dubais and the Abu Dhabis, just not comparable, because they are small countries, lots of money. We are the only one of the third world countries which are trying to break into we're already number 3 in domestic, and I think number 5 or number 6 in international. And after post-COVID, we'll have to see how the international thing opens up. But on the domestic side, we are getting closer and closer, and hopefully we'll overtake the US also. Pipe dream, but we'll get there. Utkarsh?
Okay, then. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amber. Thanks a lot for the wonderful exposition. I request you to stay. I heard that you are having a meeting also. In the meanwhile, I will go over to the bus transport. It is being led by 2 eminent persons, both hands-on experience, Prashanth Bachu and Prasanna Patwardhan. So they will be introduced by Mr. Avinash, and then please keep time in mind, because 2 speakers, if you both overshoot, then we'll be overshooting much more. So over to Avinash.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my privilege to introduce Prashanth Bachu, Sri Prashanth Bachu. He's an urban transport specialist currently working as principal consultant at Change. He is a civil engineer from Vasavi College of Engineering and has done his master's degree in transport engineering and planning from Louisiana State University. Sri Prashanth Bachu worked for over 20 years extensively in bus transit, non-motorized transit, and city planning. He has also helped in design and hand-holding of indoor bus rapid transit system, and has trained officers and staff of Capital Region Urban Transport, Bhubaneswar. His another initiative is the launch of a movement to reclaim streets and sensitize people on the issues of air pollution, road safety, and social inclusion. This has led to the launch of the first car-free day in Hyderabad in 2015, and later it was scaled up to the cities of Gurgaon and Delhi. The other speaker is Sri Prasanna Patwardhan. Sir is the chairman and managing director of the Prasanna Group, and is currently the president of Bus and Car Operators Confederation of India. Sir has a very diverse personality combining entrepreneurship, public-spirited activities, and passion for sports. After joining his family business in 1985, he has catapulted the business from 3 lakh turnover to over 300 plus turnover of business. His work is recognized in various forums and has been awarded more than 20 times by different bodies. He is also an active member of many industrial bodies and transport organizations. Sir is an alumnus of Erickson College and is also a member of Indian Basketball Squad. I welcome you, sirs.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much, Avinash, for the introduction, and Mr. Ravibabu for having me on this webinar. Unlike what we have heard from the previous speaker, Mr. Amber, bus transport is not as fancy, and then it is still struggling through the process of survival in this country, as well as in the journey towards public-private partnership, which is a buzzword. While PPP is widely talked about right now, when it comes to the bus sector, it has been there for the past couple of decades. In the early 90s, when the state transport undertakings were facing funding crunch to purchase buses, most of the southern state transport agencies, they started hiring private buses, and rebranded them with their name and paid a fixed rate per kilometer, which got known as a gross cost contract. So where the private operator was basically giving on hire a bus along with a driver. So that reduced the cost. One is that the state transport undertaking did not have to invest the capital cost. At the same time, they were getting a driver along with the bus, whose salaries were much lower than what the STU itself paid. But however, in the same time period, many of the STUs in the north were on the decline. They almost moved out of city bus services and are mainly limited to regional transport. So thus basically came the decline of bus transport. Now with the increased focus on urban transport, the challenges, how it is affecting the economy and everything, there was focus on bringing back the city bus services. And that's how in 2006, the city of Indore in Madhya Pradesh, in their bid to restart the services, embarked upon the idea of organizing private bus operators under the government brand. What they did is they got some big private operators who are locally doing their operating buses, and then they got them to jump on, partner with the government. So private operators, obviously, they were very happy to do so, because what was happening is that that gave them the brand name, that gave the protection from the government. Now they could park anywhere. Now they could have parking spaces. They could not have penalties because it is known as a government bus. So this model, now again, the ticketing and the entire operations was with the private operator. So the government's role was just fixing the route and plan and a fare, and everything else was taken care by the private operator. And in turn, the private operator was paying money to the government. So this was called as the net cost contracting. And suddenly this became extremely popular. Now you can imagine where other STUs were losing money in the city bus operations. Here we see Indore making money out of bus operations. So this model very quickly spread, in the next 4 to 6 years, it spread from cities in Gujarat to Odisha and everywhere in the north. However, those who really understood urban bus transport always knew the fallacy in this adventure. Finally, the curtains came down on this by 2015. Even in Indore today, there are a few buses which are still operating on the net cost, Indore, Bhopal, and a couple of other cities. But now the net cost model works in a way that the government is actually offering money to the private operator, a fixed money to the private operator as a viability gap, instead of getting money from the private operator. So thankfully, it has come to that stage. But anyway, more or less, it is understood now that the GCC, the gross cost contracting, is the best way forward, where the revenue risk is taken by the government, and the planning and planning of the system is taken care by the government, and the private operator is best given the role that they are apt for, where they are trying to build efficiency into operations. However, even that is not without problems. Like, for example, the government still doesn't understand that it is a partnership. The governments have still looking at private payers as vendors and client relationship, which is a challenge. Now, next, there is always a constant disagreement, on the invoicing. There is no proper monitoring mechanism to establish the actual distance operated by the fleet. If the fleet is following, the private operator is following the schedule, or if the drivers are stopping at the bus stops, and so many other contracted conditions, right? While writing the contract, they are very complex, taking care of everything. But when it comes to operations, there is nobody is in a position to monitor all these things. In the same way, even in case where the invoicing amount is established, what is paid to be paid to the private operator is established, the challenge is that the fare revenue from the buses is not covering the entire cost of operation. So, and states and cities are not really forthcoming in funding these services. So that also becomes a problem. Now, the fourth and not so noticed issue is the lack of depot infrastructure for the buses. once contracted, at best, most cities, if you see, at best, what the private operator gets is a bare parking space in the name of a depot, which means that the newly purchased buses can't be maintained. They quickly lose sheen and even public favor, which is quite a challenge. So these are all the issues that are still prevalent in bus operations. But before I close, I would like to quickly bring attention to another important myth in this approach to going private. The notion in outsourcing to private agencies is that they'll bring in efficiency and thus reducing the cost and possibly bring profitability to the otherwise loss-making enterprise. But what happens is, efficiency can come only in two ways. One is by reducing manpower costs, meaning reducing salaries of employees. And the second one is by process optimization and efficiency. What's happening here is whatever efficiencies or whatever cost reduction is happening because of reduced manpower cost is actually compensated because of the financing cost of the private operator for buying the buses and infrastructure, and also the profit margin of the private operator. We should keep that in mind, that they are working for profit. Now, if you come to the other side of efficiency in process, unfortunately, in all the cities except for Delhi, maybe, most of the city bus operations, private operators are running 150 to 200 buses, where it is very difficult. In case of city buses, I think we need to go to almost 500 to 1,000 buses to come up to efficiency. So we are still working hard on these things. So I think I have already overshoot my time. So in this context, I'll stop it here and then wait for more questions in the session to answer. Over to you, Prasanna.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I've been working in this field for last about now under public-private partnership for more than 13 years. But apart from going into those details, because that may take me a day to explain those problems. But the first thing which I would like to say is it is at a very nascent stage in bus operations, and this needs to get matured. So today, operator is selected for getting only financing from him, and the other two aspects which Professor Raghuram explained it very well, that how do I make it more customer friendly, or how do I make it more efficient? That entire thing is missing in gross cost contract. I have seen, my grandfather used to work when it was totally private, so I have seen both, my family has seen both sides fully nationalized and fully privatized. And today, when we talk about public-private partnership, this is a balanced way of actually taking public transport ahead. But unfortunately, that is not happening. Now, for example, these new contracts which are coming in for electric buses, there more weightage is given to financial capabilities of the operator rather than his operating capabilities. And it starts from giving you concession agreements, right? So first thing which I say is it is very important that you have right kind of concession agreement and right kind of approach to even float a tender. When they float a tender, there is absolutely no seriousness. I have seen 3, 4, 5 tenders getting cancelled and again going in for retendering for no reason. And this kind of seriousness is not being serious is very dangerous, because when operator enters into any tender, he spends huge amount of money just to ensure that he is on the right cost. And when it gets cancelled, all that money is waste. So it has to be a very serious process when one goes for tendering. Otherwise, this public-private partnership will never become successful. Second thing which I say is, apart from this concession agreement, what is important is to see to it that this system becomes successful, sustainable. I have seen JNRM wherein government paid entire money for the buses, some cases 60%, some cases 70%, and balance was paid by operators. But after paying that money, there were no takers, because who is going to pay to run those buses? So just giving upfront money for buying assets and then not giving any support is also not a right thing to do. So in any public-private partnership, there has to be a long-term perspective to ensure that it is real partnership and both are partner, and it is important for both partners to ensure that more and more customers board those buses. And if that is not the purpose, then whether those buses are run by private or whether those buses are run by public, real partnership will not come into effect and people will not get benefit out of this system. So real partnership is first thing. Second, I would say that budgeting. Most of the, whether it is STO or SPV or cities or even states, when they approach for this tendering or concession agreement, then they don't make any budget. How much viability gap funding I will require? What is going to happen? What is the actual cost? What is the expected cost? And what I need to do? So responsibility of even both parties is not clear. Who is going to do what? So there is ambiguity in many of the concession agreements, because of which also it fails. So without budgeting, going in for tendering and going in for any public-private partnership will not make it successful and sustainable. And third thing is, without having any proper infrastructure, I believe that providing infrastructure such as land, developed land, or whatever is immovable asset is a responsibility of government, because that asset is going to remain with you for hundreds of years. So there has to be, it has to be with government, and it should not be parted with private party. So entire development of infrastructure has to be taken care of by private, public government, and private person can bring in his movable assets, and that he can take it along with him when that concession agreement gets over. And many of the concession agreements, I have seen that they fail because of only one reason, which is not getting paid on time. Operators don't get paid on time, and to reduce liability, fines or penalties are used to reduce the liability rather than bring in quality of service. So if these things are taken care of, I am sure public-private partnership would be the right way to go ahead, rather than going in 100% nationalization or 100% privatization. On this note, I think I have overshoot my time. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Prashanth, and thank you, Prasanna ji. A wonderful exposition. Actually, this is a mode, this is a sector where it is used by maximum number of people, and the least amount of study is done as per my understanding. So it's good that we are hearing from the people who had hands-on experience in this sector. Now we go to the moderator session. So moderator session, Mr. Utkarsh Majmudar will be leading the discussion. After that, in the last 5-10 minutes, we will, if the questions from the audience are not covered in the discussion, moderated discussion, we'll specially concentrate on those questions. Now, Utkarsh will be introduced by Nikhil. Before Utkarsh goes on, I request all the panel members and also the people in the YouTube to stay tuned in. Sorry for the delay that has happened. We'll extend it by another 30-35 minutes. Thank you very much. Over to you, Nikhil.
Thank you, sir. It's a privilege to introduce our moderator, Utkarsh Majmudar, sir. Sir is fellow of Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and PGDM from IIM Lucknow. Sir is a professional with over 2 decades of experience encompassing teaching, research, and administration at premier business schools in India, including IIM Bangalore, IIM Lucknow, and IIM Udaipur. Sir is working with large corporations in India such as GE Capital, iGate, and SSBC. Sir has presented and published at various international and national conferences. In fact, his publication has found a place in United Nations Global Compact Yearbook 2014. In 2014, he led an annual research study that ranks India's top companies on CSR sustainability. Sir, areas of interest include CSR, sustainability, and finance. Sir co-authored a book, Balanced Responsible Business for the Digital Age. He has written numerous articles and authored numerous cases. With these words, I request Utkarsh sir to take the stage and speak to you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. So what I'll do is I'll reflect on a few elements before I go on to the questions, which I think are important. The first element is really in terms of looking at finance and capability. So this is what I think Professor Raghuram raised, and I think other people have also raised. I'm going to put a slightly different angle on it. One is, of course, PPPs help fund starved government in getting finances. And I think that's important and that's critical. But should we be looking only at that, or should we be looking at what capabilities the private player actually bringing to the table? Is it just money or is it capability? The more important question is, how can the government benefit from the capability that the private player has as part of the value chain? So which part of the value chain does the private player bring most value from and exploit that value? Right? I think that is what is actually critical in a PPP, rather than just looking at it as a financial item. The second element is stressed assets. Right? A lot of PPPs get stuck at various points, and what happens to that asset out here? Not only stressed assets, I would also reflect on stranded assets, and those are slightly different in the sense stranded assets refer to assets which were built. Say there was a coal power plant that was built. It was to last for example, 50 years. But now with solar energy and wind energy coming into play, it's not going to last 50 years. Who's going to repay that loan? Now, those issues will become important in the transportation sector as well. You purchased a bus, but now electric buses will come, right? So that issue is also critical in terms of how we look at PPPs. The third asset is in terms of financial products. The borrowing, which is a significant component of PPP, in India typically comes from bank loans. Right? Our financial markets need to develop and bring in private lending. And I think private lending is the way to go if we want to move ahead on this. Right? Internationally, private lending is a good source of funding. Right? For some reason in India, that hasn't really taken off. So I think that is an important component. The other issue is about contracts. Right? There has been some reflection on contracts, but rather than just look at contract, I think what is important is how our judiciary operates. Right? Now, we get stuck because our contracts are not enforceable, simply not enforceable, because courts take so much time in enforcing the contracts that the contracts themselves become infructuous. And that is a serious problem. And we have to address that. Right? How can we make our judicial system faster so that contracts can be enforced far more easily? Right? Can there be a 2-day hearing or a 3-day hearing and the case be disposed of? Then your PPPs will work far more smoothly. If your case is stuck in a court for 10 years or 15 years, I doubt that your PPPs are going to work smoothly. Next. Another area which hasn't really picked up, and I think it's mainly because of issues that are strategic and security issues really come up, are international PPPs. Can we leverage international players into PPPs? That is something, because the kind of capability that some of the international players can bring in. So if you look at, for example, shipping, shipping is not an area today, but look at shipping. Like, can Maersk bring in capabilities to the Indian shipping sector, right? Or to ports, right? So those kind of issues are also there. And finally, I would say that there is an issue of integration. Right? How do both parties, the public and the private, gain from each other? Right? How do we leverage each other's skills and capabilities? And I think that is also critical in making PPPs really successful. So I thought I'll just have a few words here quickly to bring in my thoughts. And now I'll move on to Q&A. And I'll start by picking up audience questions. And the first question I'll put to is Professor Raghuram. And Professor Raghuram has actually attracted a lot of questions. The first one is about regulatory issues. Saying that, do we really need a central regulatory authority for PPPs? At one level, and this is my view, at one level, there are multiplicity of regulatory issues, but at the same time, does PPP need a central regulatory authority? Professor Raghuram.
See, it's an evolutionary process for us to reach certain levels of maturity and get into sufficient fundamentals. So I think we are at a stage where we are still looking at sector-based regulators, partly because the decision-making of projects and investments are largely sector-specific, and therefore the sense that there are sector-specific issues. So regulators are emerging that way. I mean, in electricity, we not only had one electricity regulator for interstate issues at the center, we actually said every state, because it's a state subject. So I think as it evolves, the first thing I would say is maybe now it may be time to have one electricity regulator. And then, we don't have a regulator in railways. We don't have a regulator in road, actually, for that matter. Who has an arm's length relationship with the government. So in airport we have, in ports, again in ports we are saying, do we really need a tariff regulator? So the debate is still on, and I think the scoping is, but definitely wherever there are market failure issues, we need a regulator. And as the expertise builds up, I think regulators can coalesce. But today, if you had a single regulator, I think for PPPs, I'm not sure the time is right for it yet.
Okay, would you think that self-regulation would be a better approach rather than looking at a regulatory?
No. So what do we mean by self-regulation? The point is, see, the issue is not so much, self-regulation by whom? Let me take the example of railways. Like Amber said, we don't intend being the batsman and the umpire and the bowler. And see, now if you apply that to railways and take the private passenger train operations. So railways are the authority who's defining the scope of the project. Railways are a critical supplier because they are supplying the path. They are supplying access to platforms. They are supplying the driver. They are supplying the guard. Then railways are an important facilitator in the sense they say, I'll give you some spot access to maintenance facilities or whatever. Railways are a competitor because they will continue to run passenger trains on the same routes, though they've tried to put some boundaries, but actually enough has been coming out that those boundaries can easily be, in a very technical sense, can be moved out. And then on top of it, when there are contentious issues of punctuality, safety, where railways and the private party who are in a relationship, if the best is not going to the customer, then who is to blame? Or, where is the responsibility? Mm-hmm. So it's a very complex issue. And I don't know what is the meaning of self-regulation here. But what we need is, it is very clear that Indian Railways cannot afford to be the umpire, which by default today it will be. True. With all these roles, it is time that Indian Railways accepted the fact that you must have an arm's length person who, and of course, I don't think today we can define clearly the scope for this arm's length person, because, and that may be one of the reasons why railways themselves are have not yet taken the step or not yet willing to subject themselves to an idea of a regulator. But we got to begin. In fact, I'm very happy that railways began with the idea of passenger private train operations. I must compliment the railways for, if I can use the word, for the bravery they have shown in moving into that domain. But it is also very clear from simple PPP logic, simple economic logic, that by doing this without a regulator, you are doing it with your hands and legs tied, right? So I think that's the that's the issue. I mean, for the I forgot the exact wording of your question. That is, yeah.
No, that's okay. So there's a related question, and that was actually aimed for Amber, but I think he has left.
Yeah, sorry. The issue was self-regulation. Yeah. So as I said, you need a regulatory structure. Very clear. Okay.
Okay. Or maybe a centralized board, like the US has a surface transport board that looks at various aspects and regulates, see how it works, and things like that. So maybe that's a model that we could look at.
See, the minute we go to a stage where we accept and implement the principle that government's role is not in doing the business, and once it sheds all those activities and retains its role as the policy maker and create an arm's length umpire or a regulator, then I think, immediately we should coalesce the multiple modes. So automatically that central board or central ministry, because issues are multimodal. And today, many times things fall apart. They fall between stools. So that has to happen. But I'm not sure, again, today, given the complexity with which we are stuck in even managing delivery, so first you got to shed that. And then you, obviously, I mean, I think all these should happen, and they will happen naturally. I mean, because it's easy to see. Yeah.
Okay. There was a related question which was addressed to Amber, but I think he has left. So the question really is in terms of, there are foreign players who would want to come in and participate in PPP, but our complicated structures really sort of put them off. And the fact that contracts are not sort of honored and things like that. So how do you see we can attract these guys?
So it also ties up with one of your, goes to the thought point that you put out, Utkarsh, about international. Actually, if you go back to the evolution of PPPs in India, the first set of road projects in the Golden Quadrilateral required an Indian player to tie up with a foreign contractor to come in, because the very premise that you raise, that can we bring in international expertise where that same domain is way ahead in terms of the superiority, world class, customer orientation, whatever, quality. So that's how it started. And once we built maturity in our way of Indian players, then that restriction that you must have a foreign player is removed. And I think that's quite fine. Today it's open. Actually, in many sectors, FDI and all has sufficiently opened up. But you're right that people will think twice given the complexities in the country. But with all that, people have come. Take in a road, because today road was not, I didn't mention, today the whole OMT model or TOT model, whatever, has come in a big way. Some of the initial investors are Cube Highways of Singapore and Macquarie from Australia. They have come, with all the understanding that in India, there could be issues of dealing with government, with regulation, with, local public and, the legal issues, but they still see value. They still see value in it. So I think today in most sectors, there is no restriction at all. Airports, anybody can come. I mean, Bangalore airport is now being run by a completely foreign investor. Oh, it's a different matter that Fairfax is the promoter of Fairfax is an ex-IIT Madras person who went to Canada, settled there, and started this company, which is done extremely well. But it is a Canadian company. So, and I think we are quite open to that idea. In fact, to me, I hope the Indian PPP players who develop expertise will start going global. In fact, India should start providing expertise globally. And I hope, we'll quickly move into that.
Absolutely. And I think countries like, continents like Africa, where there are who are relatively less developed as compared to India, they can really benefit from Indian expertise. I think some of it is...
Take the example of Airtel. See, the fact that you brought private players in telecom in India, I mean, they've gone and they're doing a great job in Africa or in Middle East. GMR went out to at least a few airports globally. And Adani is going out in ports in Myanmar, in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. With the experience they're picking up in India, I won't be surprised, given Adani's focused approach and quite an aggressive approach, that Adani will become one of the top port players in the world. Yeah. I mean, while you did mention about, Maersk, actually, we have had Maersk's expertise in India, in ports, in ICDs, in container train operations. We have been open to foreign players coming in. Initially, there may have been restrictions. There's that, meaning percentage. I think in most sectors now, if not 100%, it is 75%, and so on. So, yeah.
The next question I'll take to, I'm not sure whether Prashanth or Prasanna, either of you can answer.
Or probably both of them also.
Okay. This is about the role of STAs in promoting e-vehicles, and how do we sort of build up this transition from existing. I think one of the questions also sort of raised was about the move to CNG vehicles. So you have the traditional petrol diesel vehicles, you have the CNG vehicles, and you have the e-vehicles. So how does this transition happen, and how can the STAs change their mindset in order to bring them about?
Related to PPPs particularly, but it is going slightly tangential. But nevertheless, let me say, right now, what's happening today is that we are trying to push towards PPP at one end. We are trying to push towards various technologies, electric or CNG on the other side. And we are trying to go in multiple directions when we are still not able to fix the underlying policy and financial problems that are plaguing the bus sector. So if we see in the past 1 decade, the public transport ridership has declined significantly in the country, whether it is intercity or intracity. Now, in such a circumstance, trying to get into the rationale of funding these things is not as significant, I would feel. The main thing is that right now we have got to a point where people are investing into CNG and electric. So with the FAME 2 funding that was given by the government, they are bringing in subsidy for electric buses, and most of the electric buses are brought in by private players. It's a concessionaire is a joint venture between the manufacturer as well as a private operator. So that is happening. But I'm saying that the focus fundamentally has to be on stabilizing the sector. Like, for example, we have not reached the scale that is required. We have to really focus on few cities and get to a certain scale. That is very important. The next very important thing is to fix the technology backbone, so that we have spent thousands of crores across the country in putting up ITS technology for efficiency. But even today, after so many years, none of the cities have a working mobile app which can show you the travel time of when the next bus is arriving, like it happens in airports or in railways, or we are not even able to get a smart card, which is having sufficient penetration in this country. So the real challenges are many more. And had the government, just like the way UPI is done, right? The government invested, the Ministry of Information Technology has invested in a backbone for, say, GST or even UPI, and they provide the technology backbone. And today, so many private operators, private banks or public banks are using that backbone to flourish. So I think the same thing is required for the public transport sector. And similarly, building a capacity building program. Today we don't have, and Prasanna should be able to vouch this better, that we don't have skilled manpower. There is no training institute, significant training institute which can put hundreds and thousands of trained manpower like it happens for pilots in the aeronautical space or the captains in the shipping industry. We don't have such kind of institutions, at least in the quantum that we require. So the issue of CNG and electric is much smaller. I think that is already taken care of in this space. Prasanna, if you want to add.
So I think first and foremost, what is important is how do we attract more and more people towards public transport. So this all debate about public operator or private operator is useless if at all if we are unable to do that. So why we are going to PPP mode needs to be understood first. It is not only for short of money that government is going towards PPP. So ultimate aim is to attract more and more people towards public transport. And naturally, when more people start traveling on public transport, your pollution will automatically come down. And then next question is what kind of fuel you are going to use. I believe now CNG, there are a lot of issues about even filling stations. Distribution is not that good. So conversion from diesel to CNG, though it is easy, but it is not so easy. And particularly with new technology coming in with Euro 6 and all, that pollution levels are also coming down. But I think going forward, electric would be a right way to go forward. Apart from electric, then we have LNG and CNG also. So for particular operations, you can have CNG wherein fuel stations and everything available, or even LNG for long distance buses. But wherever you don't have CNG fueling stations, electric is the right option because electricity is most well distributed energy. So at least distribution pattern is fixed. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel how to distribute it. So I think a focus should be more on customers, how to bring more and more customers to public transport, and all other things should revolve around getting those people on board.
That's interesting, Prasanna, that you say electric. But while even I'm going to bat for electric, the question again on electric is that can we bring in 3 or 4 lakh electric buses into the market in the next 5 years? That's also a question. So electric is still going to be 1% or 2% of the market share, or maybe 5% by 2030. So and then the technology is still not stabilized. So we have to keep these things in mind. And I'll go back to the focus of what Prasanna said, that the fundamental issue right now is to preserve the mode share of public transport and then look at public or private operators as a value add, as a service delivery mechanisms. But the fundamental thing is improve the public transport itself, because that has significant impact on pollution rather than what difference that electric or CNG can make.
Okay.
Amber is back. Amber is back.
Okay. So since Amber is back, there's one question. There are actually 2 questions for Amber. One of them, I think Professor Raghuram did try to answer. One is about the foreign players, and if they try to come in through a PPP mode in India, they sort of face the kind of regulatory and legal issues which they don't face in their own countries. And that sort of discourages them from being part of the process here. So how do you think that works in the civil aviation sector?
But Utkarsh, but that's not borne by evidence, right? Because when Jewar, which is going to be one of the largest airports in Asia, not India, 6 runways, maybe 15, 20 years down the line, it's a Swiss company, and Swiss Europeans, they won't go anywhere if they don't see everything clean. and that too in my home state of UP, which often is not very regarded very highly by people south of the Vindhyas. So it's not borne by, they paid the highest, they paid higher than Adani, who had just won 6 airports. Again, a big controversy. How can 6 airports? I mean, it's a fair bidding, electronic bidding, Baba. You put 1 rupee more than Adani, you'll get it. So they beat Adani's, they beat GMR, with whom they had the 10% right of first refusal. So they had to quote more than 10% of what GMR would have quoted. And GMR has a natural advantage, which now Adani's have in Mumbai, of controlling both the airports. So literally, like, Akha Mumbai ka Malik kaun? Adani. So isi tarah Delhi maybe GMR would have loved to have both, but so the Swiss people, Zurich, who's already there in Bangalore, okay, as a partner, and they say they know the whole 9 yards of dealing with ERA and MOCA and DGCA and Airport Authority, etc., etc. They, after all the Bangalore experience, they still come and bid highest, beat all these top Indian companies, and still get it. So unfortunately, I'm not able to appreciate the question.
Okay. The other question that has come in is in terms of, and this has been asked by Mr. Venugopal, how much capital is generated by PPP in the airport sector?
By capital, you mean the capital investments?
I suspect that's what he means.
I mean, that will be the, I mean, we just have to go to Dr. Google. They'll give you the full list of, I mean, I don't offhand remember, but we're talking terms of tens and tens of thousands of crores. But I mean, let's discuss policy here. These are numbers and statistics will be there on Dr. Google.
Okay.
I mean, Delhi itself, 10-15,000 crore. Mumbai first phase, 10-15,000 crore. Mumbai now the fourth runway and the fourth terminal will come up. Maybe another 15-20,000 crore. Bangalore is about 15,000. So 15 karke, I'm talking about almost 18, 19. And then, of course, Airport Authority doing fantastic work in the interiors where no private sector will go. On Udan airports, another 5,000 crore. So if you just add up, it'll add up to something like 50, 60 or 70,000 crores. But it's best that Dr. Google tells you than me, because I don't want to give wrong numbers. Utkarsh?
Okay. But the role of Airport Authority of India, I think it's still going to be critical, right? Because
very critical. Because on a lighter note, because we've done a lot of very serious level, heavy talk on a Saturday afternoon. Everybody's lunch is waiting and the wives are giving dirty looks. So I'll just entertain you with like a 2-minute snippet. Okay, so way
That's
back in 2000,
gender-loaded comment. Yeah.
Okay. So if the ladies on the call, then the husbands are giving dirty looks. I mean, come on, shut it off. So spouses, let's just use a gender-neutral word, spouses. Yeah. So at 2008, when I was in my KPMG days, we had done this study for MOCA, reviewing AI, and one of our recommendations was that the top 23 airports should be given out on PPP, just like you've done it on the 4 metros, Hyderabad, Bangalore, and then followed by Delhi, Mumbai. And that was way back in 2008 or 2009, 12 years back. And at that time, we were literally lynched that day at AI. I don't know how we came out alive. And our bills were, on a lighter note, our bills were delayed for 6 months and so on and so forth. Finally, MOCA had to intervene and we finally got our payment and I got my salary. So this was 2009, okay? And we said top 23 airports. So good to see that now finally, एक एक करके छह के lot में now we have come up with this bundling thing, you know, like Varanasi, Kushinagar, etc. So all that is finally taking place, but it takes 12 years for all the nice things to be said and then finally to be done, because a lot of politics and ideological issues and so on and so forth. So PPP is not an easy thing, and these are crown jewels of AI which are being given out. Okay, so this process will continue, but AI, and so one of the criticism we got when we submitted our report at that time to then AI and then MOCA was that, you're telling a tailor not to do tailoring or a cook not to do cooking. We said, no, read a report properly. It's a 6-month effort. So we are still saying crown jewels where there's already a private sector, a viable private sector waiting to invest money, money is available, talent is available, they'll use some of your best people. Okay, give it to the private sector. And you don't focus on the nation building role, which is going to, we have 700 plus districts. We have, at that time, we had only 60 or 70 airports operation. Now, of course, we have touched 125 thanks to Udan. But at that time, there were just 50, 60, and even Indigo, which was market leader, was going only to about 30, 31 airports. Market leader, going to 31 airports out of 700 districts. So we said, you still have a role. Focus on areas in the interiors where no private sector will go. Create those, incubate those airports, and once they reach that critical mass where an Adani, Ambani, or a GMR, or a GVK, or a Zurich, or Paris airport gets interested, sell them off at the highest possible to the highest possible bidder, and the money that you make again gets recirculated and goes back into the interiors. So that is a very critical role. And of course, all this knowledge you can also take abroad, and you can do consultancy projects across the world in third world countries where you know how to run these low cost, very, very cost intensive, cost effective airports. And that again is a huge capability that you have. So this was 2009, it's 2021 now. Things are moving that way. AI definitely has a huge role, just like, say, post offices or railway stations or bus addas in small towns. Utkarsh?
Okay, thank you. I'll move on to Mr. Abhijit, and two questions for him. One is in terms of looking at metro rail services, which are willing to work in very different ways. So one of the examples with this gentleman has given is that can they operate as courier services? I mean, partly as courier services, right? Can railways look at some of these ways of monetizing and generating revenue out of it? The second one is in terms of how can metro rails look at their the assets that it has and the land that it has, which I think is generic to railways also, and to try and generate more resources out of it.
One thing just in the beginning, that the metro rail actually doesn't come within Ministry of Railways Affairs. Specifically, it is the part of Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. But as a concept, yeah, you're right that as far as monetizing the assets of whatever Indian Railways are holding it presently, we're in the process of preparing a pipeline, asset monetization pipeline. That includes station development as a part of it, where basic operational area can be made exclusively for the railways, and one can develop it above the station building. The real estate development can be done, and the return to the investment, which is who is the developer, that can be happened. And similarly, as Professor Raghuram was talking, he was part of the budget announcement implementation webinar earlier in the month of February, and it was already discussed in that also, that dedicated freight corridor, which is the Eastern and Western dedicated freight corridor, which we plan to complete it by June 2022. So operation and maintenance of O&M of that, the corridor, it's being thought of, and it's being planned what way to monetize that asset also. Maybe by way of, it can be thought of by way of gradual disinvestment, or by way of putting an InvIT there, or maybe, as Professor Raghuram again said, the different new models like TOT and all which have come. So we are in the process of asset monetization, creation of asset monetization pipeline activities. Some activities have already been, some aspects have already been shortlisted. It's still being deliberated upon, and shortly will be available.
Thank you so much. And we have just maybe 1 minute left. So last 1 minute to Professor Raghuram. And this is the question: how do you monetize Concor by breaking it up? So somebody wanted a little more detail on that.
First of all, why am I saying breaking it up? I'm just saying that if you're privatizing Concor and the control is going to go to a private party, and once they start getting more aggressive in the market, they can easily finish off the large number of small players who are there, of which anyway, as I said, only some are a little more active than many others. There are, I think, 17 licenses out there or whatever. So if you really want healthy competition, then you've got to break it. But I'm not sure how that is connected with the... Okay, what you're saying is, we may get a lesser price with the 3 smaller Concors than what a single Concor may get in the market. Maybe. Though I won't say that's how it would be. I mean, again, that would be difficult to predict. But we have to see in the long run. I mean, what is it that we want in the rail container transportation domain? So, we don't want those existing players to be kind of finished off and a private monopoly effectively operating. So I think that is the concern. And there is enough evidence of that from other countries. We should learn that,
So I think what you're suggesting is something like AT&T was split up. You split up Concor and realize value out of it.
And then you will have a Concor A, Concor B, and a Concor C, and then you sell them. Yeah. I mean, for example, you got Tughlakabad and what's the other big container terminal near Delhi? Dadri. Right. So, maybe Tughlakabad would go to one company and Dadri would go to the other. And in case there's another one around Delhi, I think there are, a third company. And like that, nationally, you have to break it up. And then the rolling stock, In fact, another model, and I haven't given full thought to it, could be to separate the fixed infrastructure, like the bus people talked. Maybe we need to have 1 or 2 or 3 container terminal companies. And then only the rolling stock of Concor, which is, of course, much, much larger than any of the other private players, again, can be there. You can easily break it up because you're just, instead of selling all the rolling stock to one company, you sell it in smaller lots. But maybe we need 2 or 3 container terminal operating companies who would enter into arrangement with the container train operators. That could be another model. And maybe, I'm just thinking, I've not fully thought about it, but that may be a way to do it. Essentially, because in the remaining freight, willy-nilly, that's what is happening. Because we have private freight terminal and we have SFTOs, special freight train operators. So, because managing the rolling stock is a different kind of business. More market savviness is required, but maybe less risk because it's a mobile asset. And their private party can easily play a very major role. And then you have freight terminals, which are fixed assets, but again, where a private party can play, like an airport. So airport versus airline kind of a structure. Maybe, that is another. There is, when we break Concor up, we should also consider the separation of terminals from the rolling stock.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I think now that we are almost out of time, I'll hand it over to Subham Jain for.
No. Utkarsh, a few more questions. Of course, this is my question in terms of how do you prevent private monopolies? Because PPP, there is no, in any of the policy documents, we are not looking at these monopolies issues. Is there any thoughts? For example, airlines, as Amber was saying, Bombay monopoly is now with Adani, let us say, just for example. So, Professor Raghuram or anybody else?
I mean, I'm ready to answer you. First of all, Bombay monopoly was a government thought out idea. Let's be very clear about it. The authority had said, because when Bombay and Delhi were going for private play, they were concerned that a person coming to make a huge investment, if they feel a threat that another airport may come up in the vicinity, about which there was some thoughts that then their business will suffer. So they were given first right of refusal, which means government itself was open to the idea that in an airspace around, one market, that there would be one player. Though,
so I'll just clarify. A national level monopoly. I'm talking about a national level monopoly.
So let's begin with that as a monopoly. Now, national level monopoly, yeah. Now, like see in ports, Adani is moving up there. By the way, they have bought Krishnapatnam, Gangavaram, Kattupalli. One by one, they are just buying up ports. So I don't know whether in the PPP bid we need to have one regulatory body that will apply its mind on it. I would personally think today the Competition Commission of India is empowered to look into it. So the Competition Commission of India should look at it, and I would worry about it. Beyond the point, I would worry about it. But of course, today I would say the port, the landlord port business, not the terminal business. Terminal business, there are many players, but the landlord port business is moving to a duopoly. One would be Adani, the other would be the central government, which is the major ports. So that way there will be some competition, but it is moving into a duopoly. But yes, we have to think about these issues, and partly it could be the Competition Commission's role. Yeah.
But you want to say something?
Yeah, so we are not very, as Gurudev just clarified, frankly, there's very little I have to add to what Professor Raghuram has already clarified. So I think there's Competition Commission, there's media, there's a very raucous media, then there's politics. So there are enough, it's a very fun country to be in, India. So there are enough checks and balances to prevent any one player, Adani, Ambani, Tata, Birla, GMR, GVK to suddenly, as I say, private monopoly is 10 times worse than government monopoly. So we have enough checks and balances. We are not too worried. And also there was this big question that all 6 airports went to Adani. Now what do we do? So then it was clarified in the parliament also by our honorable minister that if you just add up, I think it came to some single digit number. If you add up all the 6 airports, they contribute to just about some 8, 9, or maybe some 10% of the country's this thing. So if you're anywhere running, if you're GMR running Delhi airport, which is almost maybe say 20% of the world of the country's traffic, frankly, 6 airports all going to one party, frankly, makes no difference. There's Competition Commission, as I said, enough checks and balances. We're not too bothered about monopoly. And don't forget, there's an ARA regulator, there's a ministry, there's DGCL, so we have enough. And then, of course, we have all kinds of enforcement agencies. So government is not too bothered about one guy getting too big for his shoes. Ultimately, the consumer matters. The airlines are the end consumers, and beyond the airlines are the passengers who are the end consumers, and they have a very, very big voice. And now with social media, you have direct access to the PM himself. So enough checks and balances. No worries. Okay. Ravi?
One more question is left out. The PPP effects are worse on workforce employment. Please explain. Is PPP implemented successfully in country with wide diversity, geographical and political differences? These are 2 questions posed from one person. Effect on employment. Anybody would like to take over this? Amber, you will take?
Yeah, so I'll say if business, I mean, if AI, I don't know, pre GMR in Delhi airport, AI must be 200, 300, maybe 400 crore turnover. And that turnover then goes to 3,000 or 4,000 crore. If it's 10x growth in just about 10, 15 years, you can just imagine the number of jobs that have been created. Because, I mean, earlier you would have some 2 eateries, unknown eateries, and then now you have some 200 eateries spread all over the airport. Each eatery would have 10 people, and they are working round the clock. And then other than those 10 people at the airport, there could be 40, 50 people behind the scene cooking the food and bringing the food and supplying milk and eggs. So, I mean, I can just go on and on the multiplier effect. So at the airport itself, there's such a huge number of people that you see at the airport. Okay. And then you multiply by 5 as the supporters, people who support those people. So PPP, yes, in the name of efficiency at the airport, every man that GMR or GVK or Adani or whosoever runs these airports, they'll be very, very touchy about every employee that there is. Everybody will have to justify his existence. But in terms of the economic growth and overall job creation in the airport, around the airport, beyond the airport, and in the local Delhi, Mumbai, or wherever they are, in the local economy, huge job creation. Ravi?
Thank you.
So can I just, one is, of course, there will be growth, but let's take government's own. Whenever there is a new technology, when we moved from steam traction to diesel, the number of staff required for moving a train from, say, Chennai to Mumbai, if you looked at the loco-related staff, it would have come down substantially. But Indian Railways went through it because there were so many other gains. And then I'm sure in the long run, so many more trains came up, so many more. So, I think this is all part of growing.
Okay. I think we have covered all the questions from the audience. So we'll conclude this webinar today. Before we conclude, of course, the next webinar we are just announcing for all those who are part of this one. So next is on focus on armed forces, which for civilian people is almost a black box. So we are looking at logistics in armed forces. How to be prepared for all scenarios? That is peacetime, wartime, and everything. That could be a lot of give a lot of learnings for civilian logistics also. So it is on 24th April, that last Saturday again, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. So with this, the webinar is concluded. So now I request Sri Subham Jain to propose the vote of thanks. Thanks from my side to one and all for having accepted my invitation and having joined. Subham Jain, over to you.
Thank you, sir. We bring to the conclusion the 8th webinar of Hyderabad chapter of CILT on the topic of PPP in transport and logistics, current state and future prospects. It was an exhilarating discussion which shed light on the present status of PPP in logistics sector, the challenges and the way forward for the nation. Sri Gajanan Mallya, GM South Central Railway, highlighted the present status of PPP in transport sector with special emphasis on railways and the challenges which lie ahead of us. Thank you, sir, for your valuable time today. Professor Raghuram shed light on status of PPP in other sectors of the economy and the importance of partnership with private sector to harness their effectiveness, efficiency and technical expertise. With the help of real-life examples, Professor brought forward some of the teething troubles which private partnerships in the country, particularly the economic viability of the whole endeavor. I express my gratitude to sir for his valuable contribution to the discussion. Sri Abhijit Narendra, ED Infrastructure Railway Board, emphasized on the history of PPP in railways and the various policy landmarks along the way. Various sectors like asset creation, rolling stock in P-way, freight movement, container operations, freight terminals, goods sheds, and passenger operations have seen stories of successful PPP in Indian Railways. Thank you, sir, for taking out time for this discussion today. We heard from Sri Amber Dubey, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Civil Aviation, regarding the overview of PPP in aviation sector in the field of airport development. We have seen some outstanding cases of resource generation and the concept of per passenger fee for passenger operations, partnerships in cargo terminals, and pilot training academies as well. Thank you, sir, for your insights into a rapidly changing transport sector of the country. I express my gratitude to Sri Bachu and Sri Prasanna Patwardhan, who brought forward the developments and issues of PPP in bus transportation sector. Though it is important in providing last mile connectivity for public transport, bus transportation has seen little development in PPP. We need to develop infrastructure, streamline the concession agreement process, and rethinking of viability gap funding in this regard to ensure successful partnerships with private players. I would like to thank our distinguished moderator today, Professor Utkarsh Majmudar, for deep dive discussion in problems ailing PPP sector in transportation and logistics. We discussed the issues of central regulatory oversight and self-regulation in logistics sector and what measures have to be taken to ensure continued growth of logistics sector in the country. I would like to thank CILT, particularly all members of CILT Hyderabad, whose cooperation and support made this initiative possible. A special thanks to Ravibabu sir for putting together this very enlightening webinar on the topic of critical importance for the nation. A warm thank you for the technical support team for bringing all the participants and viewers together through technology and for a lively discussion. I express my gratitude to all our viewers for connecting with us through YouTube and for their participation through queries. Thank you all. Jai Hind.